Michael Clarke, our defence and security analyst, is with me now. Michael, we've been reporting that troops have now left the north of Ukraine. What is the current situation on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely right. They've been beaten. They've gone. Nobody there. They've all gone back to Belarus and to Russia itself to re-equip and do something about the losses that they've suffered, which have been fairly considerable. About 20% of all their forces have been incapacitated in one way or another. So they're now re-orientating themselves to this battle in the southeast.
And that's what we understand, that's where the race is almost on between Ukraine and Russia to who can get there first, who can get their equipment there first.
Yeah, it's a sort of logistics race. I mean, the Russians are going via Belgorod in Russia to get back into the southeast. The Ukrainians are going through their own lines of communication, but they've got heavy stuff to take, which requires trains and heavy trucks. And also the Ukrainians have got the problem of getting the new equipment that they're getting from the west. They've got to get it from the Polish border towards Kiev and then down to the southeast. And that doubles the distance. They've got about 1,200 kilometres to go. So while the Russians are coming round the outside of the clock, the Ukrainians are moving inside the clock. And there's this race to get their heavy equipment down for the battle in the southeast, which is taking shape as we speak.
And we had that terrible attack on the train station. What details are emerging from that? What can it tell us about perhaps what's likely to come?
Yeah, well, we now know, we can see more, the missile, this is an SS-21 for certain. It's not particularly accurate, it's quite old. We know the fact that so much of it survived the impact shows there wasn't any high explosive in it. It was a cluster bomb, so it releases its cluster bombs when it's still in the air. So what hits the ground is just basically an empty missile, and it's the cluster bombs which are intended as anti-personnel weapons. They're just intended against people. It was the cluster bombs that hit everybody in the train station, used in a civilian area, completely and utterly illegal.
And we're hearing reports that there may be an attack by air in Odessa, and Odessa is a really strategically important place, isn't it?
Yes, Odessa's declared a curfew starting today because they're expecting more air attacks. And the point about Odessa is that although the Russians are further away from Odessa than they were a week ago, they're being pushed back, the fact is they're blockading Odessa with their navy that's in the Black Sea. And the point about Odessa, it's one of the very few deep water ports on the Black Sea. It handles a lot of stuff, about 65 million tonnes of cargo a year. It's fundamental to the Ukrainian economy. Ukraine provides about a third of all the arable land in Europe as a whole. It's the breadbasket of the world. It is the leading exporter in the world of wheat. And the winter wheat harvest is waiting to be exported, but Odessa, which is where it would go from, is blockaded. So it's not only a disaster to the Ukrainian economy, but also to societies in the Middle East and Africa who are waiting for that grain. There's a food crisis developing because Odessa is blockaded. And, of course, there are voices in the West that says, well, can't the Western navies sail into the Black Sea, challenge the Russians and lift the blockade of Odessa? Well, militarily, yes, they could, but it would be an extraordinarily dangerous turn of events.